Now on the Amp'd UP211 podcast, Woody Roseland. He's an entrepreneur, filmmaker, endurance athlete, keynote speaker, and oh yeah, a cancer survivor 8 times over. At 17, Woody was a high school football player with big dreams until a rare bone cancer changed everything, eventually leading to the amputation of his left leg. But if you think that slowed him down, think again. Woody turned adversity into fuel, built a creative empire, tackled endurance sports as an amputee, and now uses his story to inspire audiences worldwide. So sit back, turn it up, and let's get amped up with Woody Roseland. This is the Amp'd UP211 podcast. My name is Rick Bontkowski, the host. However, I would just like to turn it over to my friend Woody here. Woody?
Thank you, Rick. Thanks for having me on. And I'm going to start this episode with a little rant to give people, I feel like sometimes you're listening to a podcast and you don't know the person at all. And you're like, is this worth the next hour of my life? So I'm just going to dive right in. I'm not going to start with generic backstory. I'm going to start with something that's making me angry right now.
All right.
So I've had a little bit of problems with my prosthetic leg recently, and I took it into the office, and they're like, oh, you actually qualify for a new prosthetic leg. And I was like, cool, let's check out what the market has in prosthetic legs in 2025. And the prosthetic leg industry's lack of attention to aesthetics is so annoying to me. When I'm wearing shorts, my prosthetic leg is my loudest fashion accessory that I have. I could be wearing a clown nose and it wouldn't be as loud of an item as my prosthetic leg is.
Right.
And yet, year after year after year, there's just no thought put into how the leg actually looks. Like, for instance, my prosthetist said, here's a leg, it's got a bunch of good new features, but they didn't have any option for like a case that gives it the silhouette of a leg all the way down to the ankle. And he's like, well, I can make you like a foam tube for your leg. And I was like, I don't want to be wearing a foam tube around my leg every day. I don't want to show up in the world with a handmade foam tube.
It's like one of those pool noodles, that the kids use.
Exactly. I'm like, come on, like this is... it's also like such a fun design opportunity to create something interesting, to, embrace the medium of like, it's not a real leg. How can we take that brief and do something interesting with it? But yet, time and time again, it's just like they see it as a medical device over anything else.
Yeah.
And they design it in the same way they design a shower chair for elderly people.
This is true. Shower chairs, which, I happen to use on occasion, are definitely not something that I would ever imagine Architectural Digest would be interested in doing a photo shoot of. They are definitely not attractive. Sort of a very utility kind of, let's just tuck this away somewhere so no one can see it kind of situation. But
100%.
I want to echo what you're saying because I agree in that it is, at least in the summer months here, it makes a big statement because it's out there. And I would as well hope that as we evolve in this community, that more innovation in that design piece gets utilized, and not necessarily always that it has to be lifelike, because I know in certain cultures, at least my prosthetist has told me, in certain cultures, let's say the Hispanic community, for example, he has a number of patients that do want a leg that is very lifelike. And when I say lifelike, I mean down to skin tone, painted hairs that match their other leg. So there's sort of this focus on I really need this to look lifelike, but also in the utility sense of coming up with something that, is innovative in design, isn't so mechanical looking. I tend to see a lot of AKs in that situation where the prosthesis becomes just, and I'm not saying it's for some people it's not cool because some people like that look, but sometimes they look very robotic, and that may not necessarily be the intention that you're going for, especially if you're kind of fashion forward in thinking, and you're like, well, this like any other accessory, right? This really doesn't go with me or what I'm wearing, or I just don't feel comfortable in this situation. So I do think there needs to be more thought put into that, and definitely not just in the, hey, we'll wrap some foam on it
Yeah.
and just make that.
It's such a huge opportunity, and I think, I don't know, I've always had this thought that it's kind of a tough market because there's just not a ton of amputees, so the incentives for designing there's not a huge payoff if you really nail it because it is just a smaller community.
Yeah. There isn't going to be like a volume order of, 50,000 units of those.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not an iPhone that, you can ship far and wide, It's
Exactly.
do you know, what is the number of amputees in the world or amputees in the United States? Do you know?
We're going to find out right now.
Because it's what, 300, okay, could we make predictions? 330 million people in the U.S.
Yeah, you probably already know this, and now you're going to show off.
It's probably what, 1 out of every 100,000? So what, 10 per mil? So then that's I don't know if that's right. 330 million.
Well,
I mean, it's 700 amputees in the U.S. That's wrong. That's not right.
According to Google, over 57.7 million people worldwide live with limb amputation.
Okay.
So we're getting close to 60 million.
Okay.
I mean, that's certainly a big audience. However, you and I both know that in many, many underserved parts of the world, getting access to the types of technology that you and I are fortunate enough to engage is pretty difficult. So I know a lot of people as well, I'm sure you do, in the space of, hey, we go out to these countries and we repurpose the prosthetics, the feet, the ankles, the sockets that essentially get tossed. And, my prosthetist, Dave Rotter, and like some of the people over at the Range of Motion Project, good example, they harvest lots of parts, pieces, and you know what, man? They go out to those places, those far off places in the world, and they repurpose them. They figure out a way to repurpose those tossed pieces of technology for people that just don't have access to any of this stuff. And that is, to me, is just such an incredible endeavor and such an answer to a call to action, which I know you've spoken about, because being a cancer survivor, and I've spent the last week doing a deeper dive on Woody, sort of, digitally stalking you, let's say, looking at your blog, and I think I watched your TED Talk maybe 3 times. And I mean, the thing I really like about the way that you sort of project these ideas, first of all, is the comedic piece. Incredibly funny guy. And, you do a great job of sort of balancing the severity of a situation, cancer, amputation, trauma, but also being able to pepper comedy and, a one-liner or a zinger or something that sort of, de-escalates a bit for an audience. Like, holy shit, this is like heavy stuff, but man, that was funny. That was really funny, right? Because it's that sort of tightrope that sometimes we walk as people that have gone through a trauma or gone through illness. You're someone that survived cancer 8 times. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Which, people think about cancer and they're like, okay, yeah, it's this terrible thing. Everyone's got their mantra, F cancer, cancer sucks, all that stuff. And to meet someone that has revisited death's door that many times, it's pretty extraordinary. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary. And the thing I really appreciated about your TED Talk was, that whole "you are here" concept that, I'm here. What am I going to do with that? I'm here. I survived. And I can only relate in the sense of, I was sick for 4 years. I went through a transplant. I lost my leg. There was many times, as I'm sure for you too, where your team, let's call it, we all got our team, all those smart minds in the hallway going, oh shit, this ain't gonna work out. How are we gonna tell him? How are we gonna tell him to get his affairs in order? Visiting that conversation over and over again, managing feelings about your mortality, it really does turn some screws. And the question becomes, who are we on the other side of that? And I think the humor piece is important, but I also like sort of your defiance in terms of like, yeah, this negative energy, I'm not having that.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think that comes from?
I mean, I don't know. Since I've had my leg amputated, I feel like met a lot of people, talked to a lot of people, and I kind of feel like once you get to level 10 of trauma and pain and loss and difficulty, it's kind of all the same, and it can go up to 1,000, but once you reach level 10, you're all kind of in the same boat, with someone who lost a parent or someone who lost a child or, someone who's, I don't know, I feel like it's as difficult as my amputation process was, I'm not that unique in that I dealt with pain and difficulty. And so I feel like, I don't know, some people, might put their pain on this pedestal of I have suffered more than anyone else. But I kind of have the feeling of I don't know, man, I've had worse days, just when you're living a regular life and something happens where expectation and reality are not in sync, and that difficulty of dealing with that, I've had moments like that are worse than my amputation, I kind of expected my amputation after having cancer for 3-4 years. And so to me, it's okay, yes, the thing is bad. Let's give the moment the weight it deserves, that I lost my leg and I had cancer, and that's very sad and very difficult. But still, there is, to me, that's a boring conversation of let's have pity and sadness. And it's okay, sure, there's a moment for that, but then what are you doing afterwards? What is the next move? And honestly, I kind of have this theory that trauma is the secret sauce to make someone interesting. That if you meet someone that's had too chill of a life, they're just like a very boring person. But the more trauma someone has, you're like, oh, you got some stuff going on, and you have some perspective, and you're kind of dark, and that's where the fun stuff is. Like, that's life. That's real. Of, we're all hurting. We're all doing our best to figure it out, and to lean into that side of things. Of like, okay, yeah, like this is just life.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate that concept because there's such a depth of experience that you go through when you deal with trauma. There is such a unbelievable amount of not only, processing, reflection, but recalibration that occurs on the back end of it, where you really end up not just seeing the world in a different way, but you discover yourself in a way that you would never have experienced had you not gone through that. Because yes, on the good days, when things going great, no one's dying, everyone's getting fed, everyone has a roof over their head, career's growing, all is well. I mean, I consider that to be, kind of you're just kind of coasting.
Mm-hmm.
You're just sort of status quo. Everything is ho-hum. But man, when tragedy strikes, when illness arrives, when the Grim Reaper comes calling, it's like, whoa, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Time to really, really do a deep dive on me. Who am I? Like, what's going on here? What's my, how am I going to navigate this? And if this is my moment, what's my legacy? Have I done the things I wanted to do? What's left to do? If given another chance, what will I change? I mean, there's so much to it that it just kind of erupts like a volcano. And, reading about your story and reflecting on being told, it's back. I mean, at what point in that process of, revisiting cancer, were you just like really? Are you kidding me? Like what? Like WTF, man? Like what is going on?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, in hindsight, it's easier to, like, it looks more extreme and absurd than I think it felt in the moment. Like, when you hear 8-time cancer survivors, like that is a lot. But in the day-to-day of it, it was always just one more, it's like Fast and Furious, one more job, we got to do one more round of treatment, one more surgery, and everyone's feeling pretty good about it. And so that's kind of how it was for just years and years. And, I was diagnosed at this interesting inflection point where I was 17 years when I was diagnosed. And so still a kid, still living at home. And I had it until I was, 23, I think. And so, that transition from child at home with parents to independent adult in the world.
Yeah.
And so kind of throughout all of it was just this, little constant side quest I had of ducking into the hospital. And, it might sound bad to say, but there was something about it that was kind of familiar and comforting and nice. And I had a fun time at the hospital. I liked my nurses. I had my routine. I knew the drugs I liked. I'd go in, I'd be like, yo, give me that IV Benadryl, like, let's go. And, it was like, it kind of was this process that felt natural, and this place I could just go to, and there were, always kind of nonprofits in the mix who are like, hey, you want to go to a Broncos game? You want to, go on this trip? Do you want some money? And so it was like, there was part of it that was, just kind of this little second community that I had as I'm navigating that transition from childhood to adulthood. But I think, the amputation was like, oh, this is very serious. This is a big deal. Because before then, it was like, I'm a sponge for attention, and you're the kid with cancer, and all of a sudden, everyone's like, oh, cancer, oh my God. So it was like, but then I lost the leg, and I was like, okay, this is bad. And then we started running out of treatment options. Because, chemotherapy, it's kind of like an antibiotic that once you do one, you can't really do it again because it's built up a resistance to it. So, by 5, 6, 7 times, they're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel of treatment options. And so I remember I did this kind of coast-to-coast trip where I was looking for drug trials and going to different hospitals and seeing different possible options. And that's where I ended up finding, I went to the Baylor School of Medicine in Houston, Texas, and they had this immunotherapy drug trial that was showing promising results. It's funny, I remember I met with the doctor and he's showing me all these slides in mice where he's like, this mouse had this much cancer and then like none cancer. And I was like, wow, that's pretty good. I was like, how many people have done this?
Mice.
Well, 27. You're like, oh, and how are they doing?
How are they? Yeah, how the humans?
He's like, some of them are doing great. And you're like, cool, some of 27 are doing great.
Oh, man.
But, it wasn't a lot of good options. And honestly, like, the program looked really impressive. And so ended up going with that. And it saved my life. And that's why I'm sitting here chatting with you today.
That's awesome.
Is because there was funding for that program and people were donating to cancer research. And there were federal research grants that were happening. So, I lucked out in my journey that there were enough options to just keep me going. Like, when I talk to people who have been re-diagnosed, I'm like, yo, just stay alive and keep trying things. Because there's a lot of stuff out there, and you just need one to work. So, like, you may be depressed. You may be like, I'm so sick of having cancer. But if you can find that one treatment that works, then you're good. And so I was super fortunate, that's why I'm sitting here today chatting with you, Rick.
Yeah, talk about a Hail Mary pass. That's pretty extraordinary set of circumstances. And going back to what you said before about joking around, people gravitating towards you based on your humor and you enjoying sort of the medical community around you. I would imagine that when people met you and seeing how you were in some way embracing your situation and trying to make the best of it, right? Because I've seen some of your video blog where, dude, you make like cancer look like kind of fun. Like it's funny. Some of the stuff is just funny. You're like, here are the typical reactions of a cancer patient. And it's like all these things that you like go through, I'm cold, I'm hot, I'm this, I'm that, all this stuff. And I'm thinking, this is crazy. Like this guy is, he's on the verge of, destruction, and he's finding the funny. He's finding the funny. And I would think people would see that in you. You were mentioning like, hey, you want to go on this trip, or, you want to take part in this thing we're doing, to go, this is the kind of person, this is the type of energy that we need in this community, because you went from, and still remain in sort of this, cancer survivor space, right? And now you're also playing double duty because now you're in the amputee space as well. And negativity it's a very, very, in some ways, an immovable reality at times in the community. And I will say, given through my own personal lens, with the podcast, with the people I meet and interact with, Woody, it's hard to dig some of these people out. I mean, it's tough, man.
Yeah. Could I talk to you about a personal inspiration of mine?
Absolutely.
Are you familiar with the story of Frida Kahlo?
No.
So Frida Kahlo, famous Mexican artist. So she was born in Mexico City. And when she was 16 years old, she got in this bus accident. A bus and a city tram smashed into each other. And the list of her injuries is horrific. It's like her uterus was punctured by a steel pole. She broke her back. She shattered her pelvis in 4 places. She broke her shoulder. Her femur was fractured in 5 places. It's this crazy list of things that happened to her. And the rest of her life, she lived with pain. It was just a part of her existence. And she spent long stretches of her life in, hospital beds or on bed rest. And this was in like the 1930s. Maybe even earlier than that. No, I think it was like 1915, 1920s. And so she lived her whole life in pain. She could never escape pain for her entire life. And yet, she was a prolific artist. She was opinionated. She joined all sorts of political movements. She was like meeting with all these communists were fleeing Russia and coming to Mexico City. And she just like lived this incredible life despite the pain. And I think when I think about my life and being an amputee, there is this acknowledgement that I am going to have more pain in my life than I probably want. And there are going to be moments in my life where the pain and the difficulty is in direct conflict with me enjoying my life. Like I've had moments where my wife and I have gone on vacation and something just happens with the change in pressure or altitude or whatever, and I land in a city and my leg just doesn't fit right. And it's like, cool, I'm on vacation and my leg hurts and it's tough to walk. And just this kind of acceptance of that difficulty that when you're playing a video game, you choose like what mode are you playing it on. It's like you're just playing it on hard mode, and like there's no getting rid of that, but that's okay because you can still do all these things. There's still so much possible. You just have to kind of accept the difficulty that's coming. And I think some people are kind of caught in that. I was living a pain-free, easy life, and now I'm not, and I'm really upset at that. And so when I deal with the pain, I have this resentment towards it instead of this nah, man, let the pain wash over you. This is just like you just have a new operating system on your computer that you're using, and it is Pain OS. But that doesn't mean that your goals or your wants in life have changed 1%. It's like you can still do everything. It just is, you kind of got to roll with it.
It's funny you mentioned the travel piece because I've experienced that as well. And I've gotten off, the plane and, you're walking up the jetway and you're like, wait a minute. Like something doesn't feel right.
Yeah, it's a thing.
And, I'll look at my partner, Sarah, and say, I think I need to reset. She knows what that means. I need a quick trip to the bathroom so I can take off my leg and just sort of, redon my prosthesis, take off my liner and give myself a moment, for my leg to breathe, so to speak, and basically try again. And every once in a while that works, but most of the time it doesn't. And I do agree that there is a certain level of acceptance that's necessary to stay present in the good and to remain in that space of grace and appreciation for, hey, I'm traveling. There are people that can't travel. There are people that are disabled to a point where they can or don't have the financial resources, so they can't. I'm here, and that makes me very, very fortunate. And, tomorrow's another day, because I always tell newer amputees what you're going to see over time, hopefully, if you commit yourself. There's good days and there's bad days. And brand new baby bird amputees, unfortunately, tend to have a lot of bad days. You're still figuring it out, whether that's your prosthesis, whether that's management of your limb. You're learning the tricks of the trade. You're a sponge. You're trying to get it all right. You're trying to find the secret sauce. And as that progresses and evolves, and hopefully you engage and become active and mobile, some of those bad days become better days. And hopefully over the passage of time, your bad days are fewer than the good days. And I know, you come from, being an athlete and continue to push yourself in that space. What were some of the bigger challenges that you faced, being athletic and wanting to pursue things that tested your body in that way? What would you say were the challenging moments, for you on that part?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it. The whole the full first year for me was real difficult. Kind of figuring out the leg. I mean, for me, I love biking. Biking has been huge for me because it's low impact. I feel like I'm really cautious about my good knee. Like, I don't want to, people are like, oh, you can do the one leg ski and I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm going to throw myself down a mountain and mess up my good leg. Like, I joke around that my good leg is like a single mom, that like she does twice the work and gets half the credit. And I'm like, no, man, I'm protecting this leg. And
I
so
have never heard that before. It's hysterical. My good leg is the single mom.
Yeah, she working. And so, just like the biking has been great for me because, like, I think that movement, that's something I miss as an amputee, just that freedom of movement, like, I feel like sometimes I'll be at the park with friends and I'll, see someone like play catch and the ball goes off into the distance. Just the ease to like gently jog over and grab the ball. I feel like that's what I miss when I'm like, just that, like, I'll grab it, and the bike kind of gives that to me where I can be athletic. I can, take some risks. Like, this might sound bad. One thing I love like riding my bike in traffic.
Oh my gosh.
But like, I'm smart about it, but also just that feeling of like, okay, I'm competent and I'm powerful and I'm like owning my space. And I'm like, I'm signaling, I'm coming over, and like just that ability of like, I am keeping up with traffic. I am signaling to everyone. I'm moving. And so that's been really helpful for me. To your question about what are the low points and the difficulties, I mean, I think it's just like you said, the bad days when you're, when the leg's not fitting and there's such a tax on movement with the pain, and Like when I first had my leg amputated, I was living in downtown Denver, and the closest parking garage was 4 blocks away. And so there'd be times where I needed groceries, I needed to leave the house, but my car was this like monumental distance away. I'm like, man, I gotta walk 4 blocks to get my car, then do the thing. Then when I come back, I gotta walk 4 more blocks. And so I just kind of hermited myself away during that chapter of my life because the tax on movement was so high.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's when you say ease of movement, just that simple being able to jog over to get something. And I found as a newer amputee as well that everything I did was so planned out. There was so much pre-thought, so much planning. Hey, you want to meet us for dinner? Okay. I'd find myself Googling like the restaurant, trying to figure out like through Google Maps, like, okay, what's the exterior of the building look like? How do I get in there? You know, how am I going to access? How am I getting in and out? Or even entering an unfamiliar room and, like a cyborg, like, scanning the room. Where am I going? Where are the steps? Where are the hazards? Where are the people? Just everything in terms of that mental space required to navigate unfamiliarity or something, that seems challenging, and sort of building a strategy, building the steps in order to get from point A to point B. And now that I'm, 7 years along as an amputee, it's such a pleasure that I do that so much less now, which is so nice. So being impromptu, being spontaneous with a friend, with a partner, and just kind of, going. Because when I'm a new amputee, just getting ready. It's like, oh, shit. I need an hour and a half to put myself together, make sure I've got, all my equipment and I'm fully showered and this and that and my leg's okay. But now it's such a pleasure because I can be more spontaneous now, and I don't feel that every aspect of my life requires such a tremendous amount of challenging. Obviously, when you travel, there's quite a bit of planning that goes into being an amputee, because we do have some gear, so to speak. We have stuff that we sort of carry around, but I do find that over time, even that becomes just as everyday as like a toothbrush or your shaving kit or, whatever. It's just, these are the things that I need. And if we have good support systems in our life, people that understand that, it makes it, it makes it a lot easier, where you don't feel that everyone's waiting on you. It's like, okay, well, make sure you have everything you need. We want you to have a good time. So I think support systems, are super important as well. I was late last night, I was watching your YouTube channel, and can you give me a little bit of a narrative or backstory on that film that you made that's on your channel when you were a kid?
The one in Portugal?
When you were a kid.
Oh, yeah. I would love to talk about the film my brothers and I made in
That film was
1998.
extraordinary.
You watched the whole thing?
I watched the entire thing. And Woody, I found it very compelling.
Well, I feel like I can't take too much credit because my brother was the director
Okay.
on that film. But yeah, one Christmas we had a home video camera.
Yeah.
And one Christmas we got the what is it? The like the little box that you use to digitize those old cameras, because they didn't have SD cards, they were shooting on tape. And so we got that, and then we had the original Call of Duty video game, and we found in the file directory that they had all of the sound files.
That's where you got. That's where you got some of the sound effects from.
Yes, they had all the gun sounds. They had all the music tracks. They had all the ambiances of desert battlefield and
the soundtrack was what kept me engaged. You know which scene I thought was so genius? So, I mean, what kids come up with, let's make a movie about an assassination attempt on the president, and, it's just, talk about something I would never think of, especially at that age. I mean, in terms of the scripting, I mean, it was very well done. I mean, was it lacking of audio quality? Yeah. I mean,
says the podcaster.
Yeah, I mean, I was struggling a couple times to hear what someone had said, and maybe their delivery wasn't perfect, or you had a couple scenes where it was like a full shadow in front of someone's face, you can't even see them, and that to me, that added to the novelty, that added to the authenticity of it. That these were just kids that made a movie, and I loved the genius of, I don't know how you staged it, but you were coming off of a chopper, right?
Yeah.
So the strike team's like coming off the chopper, and you shot it from behind, so you couldn't necessarily see like the actual aircraft, but you had the chopper sound. So you guys were like jumping off, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like they figured that out. Like they figured out how to make the viewer think, yeah, we're going in, man. Like we're jumping off the chopper right now.
That's so funny to hear. I feel like what I remember most from the process of making that movie with my brothers and neighborhood friends is that we would have an idea for the scenes we were going to shoot that day. We'd spend all the time to get all the props and the fake guns and the fake blood and the people. And, my brother would direct it. And he was like the director and the filmer and the, cinematographer.
Yeah.
And
he was the Spielberg.
We spent, he was Spielberg. And we'd spend all day doing it, and then we'd bring it into the computer, and we'd choose our very best clips, and we'd line them up, and then we'd put the sound effects under the different little things, then we'd put a song underneath the whole thing. And when we watched it, it was a real movie. And just that magical feeling of the intention and the music and the acting and the scenes, and it felt like something, and it was something, and we created a real thing.
You did.
And I feel like that's a lot of what I still do today, because for work, I do film and photography projects, and that same feeling of it all coming together in the edit, and the music hitting and the emotion hitting, it still is such a satisfying process.
So, and because that's still a discipline and part of what you do, I mean, obviously creativity has been, a big part of your life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always feel like, and maybe I'm a little biased because I'm a musician, but I've always felt like creative people, at least the creative people in my orbit, always seem to be sort of like the highest performers, the people that are really, really doing like genius type stuff. They're very forward thinking. They're it's not just about math and science. It's about, the possibility of imagination and what you can do if you, just dream it up. And I was very similar in that regard as a kid. We would we would make little mini movies and stuff. Not on not on the level that you did, but the one we used to create these like custom songs as well, where we would take
incredible.
we would take like little clips of popular music and we would like string them together, but we would also add like narration in it.
Wow.
So, there'd be like a dialogue and then part of a song and then more dialogue and then part of a song. And it would kind of like create this original story from all of this sort of mashup of words and music and stuff. And, like you're mentioning, we would spend an enormous amount of time on this. Mm-hmm. Just digging deep into our creative mindset and saying, okay, why we were compelled to do this, I don't know, but we did. And then we went through this phase where we were doing, this is when MTV first arrived. We were doing these like lip sync videos where, you just play a song and then, people had, like instruments and you do like a full blown video with like lights and all kinds of nonsense. But that was such a great outlet to just explore creativity and invest time into something where you'd end up with, like you mentioned, like something tangible. Like this is a thing. Like we did this thing, right? And I also enjoyed that that video you created on the Flamin' Hot mac and cheese. That's really good.
Thank you.
That's really good. That's really good stuff.
My masterpiece.
Yeah. I was like, wow. And be honest now, how was it? Was it good?
Okay, so for the viewers at home, the listeners at home, my contribution to the American culinary scene is a Thanksgiving dish called Flaming Hot Mac and Cheese. And kind of the broad strokes of it are, it's a indulgent, cheesy, cooked mac and cheese, but the big three ingredients are cotija cheese, this Ethiopian spice called berberi, and the third one, what was the third big ingredient?
You dumped a lot of chili powder in there.
Yeah, a lot of chili powder. Oh God, I'm forgetting the third big ingredient.
Yeah,
but anyways,
there was something that there was something you blended and then you poured in.
Oh, it was the adobo chilies.
There you go.
Those are the big three, and it's a really fun thing to bring to Thanksgiving because Thanksgiving dishes usually aren't spicy, and it actually has some good heat. And it's really dumb. Like I joke that it's more kitsch than cuisine, Yeah. And, it's a crowd favorite. And then you top it with actual hot Cheetos and you bake it in the oven. And I think it's good. In the process of making that video, I made it probably 4 times over the course of a month. And that's way too many times to eat hot Cheeto, to have like a whole casserole dish of hot Cheeto mac and cheese. Way, way too much.
I really enjoyed the cutaway you did twice where it's like, here's Woody in the future reflecting on what I did, making recommendations like from the future. And I think the second one, I don't know, you look like you're on another planet or something.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's brilliant.
Cinema.
Just that little subtle, like, poke you back kind of humor, which I really enjoyed. I got a kick out of that. I wanted to ask you, in terms of, your amputee journey, I mean, what advice, would you give, to someone that's either facing amputation or, is a new amputee?
That's a great question. I actually I have a friend who I had we had the same type of cancer back in the day. She's actually getting ready to have her leg amputated on March 5th. And so we were hanging out the other day talking about it. And I think my message is that, going back to the Frito Kahlo thing, it is difficult. You are making this step up in pain and difficulty for your whole life, but that doesn't mean that, your life has to be less enjoyable or that you can't achieve the things you want to. And I think, it's like it's all tangible, especially for amputees in America. I'm like, there is like the infrastructure here where there are clinics and you can get good legs. And I think, like I did this trip to Central America for this amputee trip, and I met a bunch of Central American amputees, and most of them were just on crutches, and it's like, as an amputee in America, like you're still winning. I know it's easy to feel bad for yourself that you're the victim and have been dealt this awful blow, which in some ways you have, but also like life moves on, you can move on, you can still claim a great life, and you just have to be intentional about it, and you have to want it, and you have to try and stay above the, those kind of lower feelings of resentment and anger that can bubble up from it.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And, I'd recommend our entire audience to check out Woody Roseland, check out his channels, check out his video blog. Really just an incredible story. And I so appreciate you spending time. And I know we're not going to connect in person in April, but this is just as good, man. I'm so happy that we're able to dedicate an episode, to sharing your story with our growing audience. So thank you so much.
I appreciate you having me on. It means a lot.
Oh, pleasure is all mine. Woody Roseland, my name is Rick Bontkowski. This is the AMP'd UP211 Podcast. And I want to wish everyone health and happiness. And we'll see you next time.